Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The federal government announced new measures to protect the rights of renters in Canada. We have the details. The federal carbon tax is set to go up by 23% on April the 1st. We hear from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation on how much that will cost you. And a survivor of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash made a stop at two Lethbridge high schools today, bringing a powerful message.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Federal Housing Minister Sean Fraser says Ottawa will introduce new measures aimed at protecting renters as part of the upcoming federal budget. The federal government proposes to create a Bill of Rights for renters, along with a $15 million legal aid fund to protect tenants.
We're moving forward with a Renters' Bill of Rights. We know that this isn't something the federal government can do on their own, but we are going to launch a process, beginning with consultations this summer, that's going to bring provinces and territories and other stakeholders to the table to identify the solutions that we can put in place that will ensure everyone has a floor under them when it comes to the treatment they should be entitled to as a renter. The kinds of areas that we will target with the Bill of Rights include cracking down on rent evictions. It includes sharing the pricing history for the apartment that you're seeking to rent. And we will work towards a standardized lease that ensures bare minimum protections that everyone in Canada should be entitled to when they rent.
Lethbridge city officials say the rebate for those who want in on the Clean Energy Improvement Program is going up. In response to Ottawa's Green Homes Grant coming to an end, the rebate amount for CEIP applicants will increase from $800 to $1,350. Launched in February of last year, the program provides eligible homeowners with some finances to support energy efficiency and renewable energy upgrades to their properties. Now, that includes funding for things like upgrading your windows, doors, increasing insulation, adding solar panels, and even installing a tankless water system. The City of Lethbridge received $3.8 million from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to support the implementation of CEIP for residential properties. 3 members of the Chinook High School football team who are accused of sexually assaulting a 16-year-old teammate will go to trial on October the 28th. The accused, who are 16 and 17 years of age, are charged with sexual assault with a weapon, and forcible confinement. A fourth, who was also accused, has been referred to a diversion program. Police say the victim was assaulted in a school locker room after regular school hours last October. They say the offense was not a hazing ritual. The students of 2 Lethbridge high schools heard from a very special guest speaker earlier today. Humboldt Broncos crash survivor and Amazing Race Canada winner Tyler Smith stopped by. Smith visited both Winston Churchill and G.S. Lakey schools for a couple of Green Shirt Day presentations and to discuss the importance of good mental health.
And today for Green Shirt Day at Churchill is a pretty special event. We're having Tyler Smith come. Tyler played with was Logan's teammate and friend, and Logan was Tyler's friend, and they played in Humboldt together, and they're both in the crash, and Tyler's awesome.
Appreciate you, Toby. Yeah, my name is Tyler Smith, and it's a pleasure to be here, obviously, for Green Shirt Day and, creating more awareness for organ donation, but I think, creating more awareness for connection. And I was pretty fortunate to have a special connection with Bools and to be able to talk about that and talk about, I guess, mental health as a whole and, well-being as a young kid and our youth. I think, generating that awareness is important. So just an immense amount of gratitude for being here especially with Toby. So.
Now, the National Green Shirt Day will be celebrated on April the 7th. It's in honor of Logan Boulay and in support of organ donation across Canada. The Southern Alberta Summer Games are coming up July 3rd through the 6th in Lethbridge County and the town of Coaldale. Town officials released a finalized list of official competitions for the Games on Thursday. Now, joining us from Coaldale to talk about it in more detail is Mark McIntosh, the Southern Alberta Summer Games coordinator. Mark, what events can we look forward to seeing in July?
At the moment, we have released 19 sporting events that will be registerable. Registrations will open on May 3rd. So some of the events are your normal core sports like soccer, baseball, basketball. But then on top of that, we have some other ones that kind of change year by year. So we have mountain biking, which is going to be really neat at our Owl's Nest mountain bike trails. We have pickleball, we have cribbage, we have photography as well. So great for catching all that diverse group of different athletes and skills.
Now, this will be the first time we've seen the games following, what, a 4-year-long hiatus?
Yeah, so the last official games were in 2019, and that was the 50th anniversary, and that was in Pincher Creek. So since then, they were planned to be hosted by Raymond in 2020, but unfortunately, the pandemic put an end to that. And then throughout those 4 years, there was regional variants, but no full games since 2019. So we're the 51st games.
So, Mark, outside of the regular sporting events, what else can attendees look forward to seeing?
There'll be non-sporting events as well, and kind of demonstrations. There'll be barbecues, there'll be concerts, DJ celebrations, yoga, food trucks, a lot of other stuff to keep people attended.
Love the food trucks. Now, I understand you're also looking for some volunteer help, and there's some sponsorship opportunities available.
So the Southern Alberta Summer Games really rely on volunteerism, sponsorship. So if you're wanting to get involved and are interested to learn more, please do get in touch with myself. You can reach me at mark.mcintosh@coaldale.ca. And yeah, I would love to hear from you. And if you have any questions as well, reach out and I'll help you out.
Southern Alberta Summer Games Coordinator Mark McIntosh, thanks so much for joining us today from Coaldale. You know, not a bad day today as we were right around our seasonal average of about 8 degrees here in Lethbridge, and not a bad Easter weekend is shaping up either. Jeanette Rocher is now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it should be fairly mild this weekend, but Good Friday, however, is looking a little chillier.
Yeah, a little chillier as we dip back down into the minuses that day for a daytime high of -3 only. Also could see some periods of snow that evening. Overnight low of -9 on Friday night. After that, though, we should be getting back into the plus temperatures and even seeing some teen temperatures as we get closer to next week. I'll be back later in the show to give you more details about that.
The province announced that beginning next month, Alberta seniors will save 25% on driver's licenses, birth certificates, and vehicle registrations. Premier Daniel Smith says her government is doing what it can to help those age 65 plus who are on fixed incomes.
But seniors are the fastest growing age group in the province, and many rely on assistance to meet their basic needs, afford essential supports, and age safely in their homes. So it's more urgent than ever to provide them with relief from inflation-caused high costs of living. Every dollar they save is more money that they can use for the necessities like food and utilities and housing. And every dollar saved is extra peace of mind. These discounts are another step towards helping seniors handle their expenses, and they won't be the last ones. We have more in the works. Our goals go beyond taking away immediate financial stress. We want seniors to be healthy and happy as they enjoy an affordable and comfortable quality of life.
Alberta's official opposition party is calling out Premier Daniel Smith for not continuing with its provincial fuel tax pause. The provincial levy is set to come back to the full 13 cents per litre at the pumps, or an extra 4 cents per litre of fuel next month. The Alberta NDPs say with the high cost of living right now, the timing couldn't be any worse.
Despite the fact that electricity prices more than doubled from the summer of 2022 to the summer of 2023. Despite the fact that Alberta currently has the highest rental increases in the country. Despite the fact that Albertans currently have the slowest wage growth in the country and that Alberta has the highest inflation rate in the country. At every turn, Albertans are being bombarded with costs for greater than what they can afford. And the choices of Daniel Smith and the UCP are worsening this reality.
Also on April 1st, the federal carbon tax will be going up by 23%. That'll not only impact our lives at the pumps, but also when it comes to heating our homes with natural gas. Even with the government rebate checks, the parliamentary budget officer says most Canadians will pay more than what they receive back. Chris Sims is the Alberta director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. She says the increase in the federal levy will affect everyone from homeowners to motorists, including our truckers.
So a lot of folks may not realize this, but this is why this increases the cost of everything when they jack up the carbon tax. So our truckers are going to be paying 21 cents per liter of diesel because of this carbon tax increase. So when you do the math, an average trucker filling up his big rig with diesel is going to be out about $200 extra because of the federal carbon tax. Now, if you combine that with what the farmers have to pay, so they have to heat their barns, they have to keep their chickens alive all year round. They use things like natural gas and propane to do that. There's the extra cost of your food, right? And then for the average person, say you're driving to that grocery store in your minivan or your sedan, or you're taking the kids to school. Now, if you're filling up your minivan, it's going to be around $13 extra just in this carbon tax. An average light duty pickup truck is going to cost you $17 extra. So it's just a huge, huge cost for folks. And once you get home, when you're finished driving and picking up your food, it's going to cost you there too, because most folks heat with natural gas. So the average Alberta house here in Alberta is going to be out around $400 or so because of the carbon tax this winter.
That was Chris Sims, Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joining us from Calgary. The federal government has mandated all new passenger vehicles and light trucks sold to have net zero emissions and be electric by the year 2035. Many questions have arisen regarding Canada's electrical grid capacity and the infrastructure to make it all happen. Cornelis van Kooten from the Fraser Institute and professor of economics at the University of Victoria shares his concerns.
Again, you're dealing with the grid. You've got to be able to have transmission lines going to these places where you're going to install them, and where do you install them? I mean, if you're driving on the highway and you come to a place, particularly in summer, I've been through Revelstoke, and it's just a pileup of cars there. You can barely get into the Tim Hortons, let alone, trying to park a car and then plug it into some electric outlet.
Catch more of this educational interview with Cornelis van Kooten and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up after Business News. Russia vetoed a United Nations resolution effectively abolishing the monitoring of UN sanctions against North Korea by a panel of UN experts. And that did not sit well with government officials from the United States.
I provide this message to all member states. Russia owns this failure. Russia is the reason you will no longer receive reports from the panel of experts. Today's vote will only embolden the DPRK to act with further impunity, as the DPRK jeopardizes global security through the development of long-range ballistic missiles and sanctions evasion efforts. This is not the behavior of a responsible member state, let alone a permanent member of the Security Council. And China, with its abstention, has once again shown us where it stands on curbing DPRK proliferation.
Recent reports say over the past 24 hours, more than 30 missiles have been launched by the terrorist group Hezbollah into northern Israel. TBN Israeli correspondent Yair Pinto has the latest.
Hezbollah has continued firing at Israel all morning, with one Israeli killed and 2 others wounded by the barrage of rockets fired at the city of Kiryat Shmona in the Galilee. Several buildings in Kiryat Shmona were damaged. The Hezbollah attack followed the Israeli Air Force strikes in the Lebanese town of El Habaria overnight. These strikes resulted in the elimination of a senior operative in the Jamaah Ismailiyah organization, along with several other terrorists who were hiding in the building. These terrorist operatives were known to be responsible for several attempts to attack Israelis, but they won't be doing that anymore. The Hezbollah-affiliated El Mayadin media portal said the Israeli airstrike left 7 Hezbollah terrorists dead and was aimed at the center of the Islamic medical group in the town.
King Charles III stressed the importance of friendship and acts of caring in a recorded message delivered to a pre-Easter church service. The monarch couldn't attend, however, as he continues to undergo cancer treatment.
It is for me a great sadness that I cannot be with you all today. The Maundy service has a very special place in my heart. It has its origin in the life of our Lord, who knelt before his disciples and, to their great surprise, washed their travel-weary feet. And as we have just heard, in doing so, he deliberately gave to them and to us all an example of how we should serve and care for each other.
Switzerland's famed chocolatiers are gearing up for the finale of the crucial Easter season with sculptured sweets and treats like chocolate bunnies, chicks, and eggs at a time of rising cocoa prices.
C'est une très grosse période pour les chocolatiers en Suisse. Pour nous, c'est la plus grosse période après Noël. C'est énormément de ventes, beaucoup de sujets de Pâques, comme vous avez pu le voir sur la boutique, des lapins, des poules, des œufs de Pâques.
You know, there are many thoughts when it comes to disciplining a child. Abe Block, retired pastor, now a great-grandfather, shares some seasoned advice on the importance of teaching children and how there are consequences for a kid's actions.
Discipline needs to be in moderation, but it needs to be in relation to what the problem was. Not just some wild thing out there, but try and build it so that they learn there are consequences. Look at the world today. A lot of people haven't learned consequences, and we're living with a lot of difficulty and chaos in our world because there are consequences. As you grow up and get into your job, there are going to be discipline issues. You need to learn them when you're young and when it's not so hard.
Make sure you catch more parenting tips from retired pastor Abe Block in my interview with him coming up later in our broadcast. Well, it's looking like a cooler Good Friday, but a nice Easter weekend is shaping up here in southwestern Alberta. Full weather details are coming up. You know, it's a fairly mild Thursday here in Lethbridge, and not a bad Easter weekend is shaping up. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, before Easter, of course, is Good Friday, and it may look a little cool with periods of snow.
Well, at least in the evening, yeah, we could see some flurries then, but once we get past Friday, we are going to start to see the temperature rise, get back into the pluses, especially looking at early next week. So Saturday, high of 4 degrees up to 6 on Sunday, jumping all the way up to 17 on Monday, and then look at that Tuesday, could see a high of 19 degrees, and then dipping back down to 7 degrees on Wednesday. Could see some precipitation that day as well, but in the form of showers instead of flurries. So you know what, we'll take that. Those April showers, they bring May flowers, don't they? So average high for this time of year, 8 degrees, average low, -4, that is 19. That was our high temperature back in 1966 on this day. And on this day back in 1954, we had the chilliest on record, which was -26. Sun rose this morning at 7:15, sunset this evening at 7:58. We are looking at 12 hours, 43 minutes of daylight. Okay, so on the west coast, we are seeing some clouds increasing and then clearing throughout the day. 13 for a high in Victoria, high of 13 as well in Vancouver. Vancouver seeing a 40% chance of showers, -2 for a high in Edmonton. Edmonton also seeing a mix of sun and cloud, and clearing skies in Calgary tomorrow with a high of -5 as well. Okay, so let's look to the rest of the prairies here. Saskatoon sitting at -1. Could see periods of snow ending in the afternoon in Regina tomorrow, high of 1 degree. 1 for a high as well in Winnipeg tomorrow, and could see some periods of snow there. So as we look to the central part of the country, we're seeing a little bit more sun and then partly cloudy skies. So high of 7 in Toronto, 8 for a high in Ottawa, and a high of 9 degrees expected tomorrow in Montreal. As we get into Atlantic Canada, we are seeing a rainfall warning in effect this evening into tomorrow for Fredericton. Fredericton could see 10 to 20 millimeters of rain, high of 7 degrees there, 5 to 10 millimeters expected in Halifax. Tomorrow, high of 9 degrees, 13 for a high in Charlottetown. Seeing a high seeing rain showers there as well, up to 5 millimeters, and then seeing 60% chance of drizzle or showers in St. John's with a high of 12 degrees. So there you go. That is your Good Friday forecast.
Crypto entrepreneur Sam Bankman-Fried has been sentenced to 25 years in prison after being convicted last November of fraud and conspiracy linked to the collapse of FTX. It was once one of the world's most popular platforms for exchanging digital currency. Prosecutors at Bankman-Fried had cost customers, investors, and lenders over $10 billion and misappropriating billions of dollars to fuel his quest for dominance in the new industry. They said he illegally used money from FTX depositors to cover his own expenses. Bankman-Fried had testified his intention had been to revolutionize the emerging cryptocurrency market with his innovative ideas and not to steal. The parent companies of Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok are facing lawsuits from 4 Ontario school boards. The lawsuits allege the social media platforms owned by Meta, Snap, and ByteDance are negligently designed for compulsive use. The school boards are seeking damages for disruption to student learning and the education system. The allegations in the lawsuits filed in Ontario Superior Court have not been proven. They follow similar lawsuits launched by more than 200 U.S. school districts. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 59 points on the day to finish at 22,167. The Dow was up 47 points to 39,807. The S&P 500 was up 5 on the day to 5254. And the Nasdaq was down 20 points to 16,379. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.82 to 83.17 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was up 4 cents to $1.76 U.S. Gold was up 35.07 on the day to 22.2987 U.S. an ounce, and silver was up 31 cents to 24.96 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.27 per bushel, barley's at $6.36, canola's at $13.51, and corn is at $7.47 per bushel. Live cattle April contract was down $1.30 to $186.20. Feeder cattle were down 50 cents to $249.45. And lean hogs April contract was up 58 cents to $85.15. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.86 U.S. Recapping one of our top stories, 3 members of the Chinook High School football team who are accused of sexually assaulting a 16-year-old teammate will go to trial on October the 28th. The accused, who are 16 and 17 years of age, are charged with sexual assault with a weapon, and forcible confinement. A fourth, who is also accused, has been referred to a diversion program. Police say the victim was assaulted in a school locker room after regular school hours last October. There are a number of concerns when it comes to Canada's electric vehicle mandate. Cornelis Van Kooten from the Fraser Institute will share his concerns with BCN's Jeanette Rocher momentarily. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. The Easter season is upon us. Parallel Church in Lethbridge invites you to their Good Friday service taking place March 29th at 10:30 a.m. Come for a thoughtful message, inspirational music, and connection. Children up to grade 5 will also have an opportunity for their own experience in learning about the sacred time we call Easter. Discover unique gifts and support local art and culture. The Lethbridge Handmade Market is taking place Saturday, April 13th at the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. 140 artisans will be displaying their beautiful creations, plus enter to win door prizes and a fun scavenger hunt for the kids. Parking is free and admission is $7 per person. Kids 14 and under can enter for free. For more information, visit lethbridgehandmademarket.ca. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Well, the federal government has some pretty ambitious plans to eliminate gasoline-powered vehicles in Canada, mandating all new passenger vehicles and light trucks sold have net zero emissions going electric by 2035. However, is this doable? Is it realistic? We're going to find out because today's guest has done some research on this. Joining us from Victoria is Dr. Cornelis Van Kooten. He is a senior fellow at the Fraser Institute and a professor of economics at the University of Victoria, where he held the Canada Research Chair in Environmental Studies and Climate for 21 years. He recently wrote a study on electric vehicles, or EVs, and the demand that this would place on electricity. So welcome to Bridge City News, Professor Van Kooten. Great to have you on today. Okay, so 2035. So correct me if I'm wrong here, but does that not seem like an incredibly short period of time to get to the point where 100% of new vehicles are electric? Like, where are we right now with this? What percentage of new vehicles being sold are electric?
Yeah, 11 years is a short period of time.
Yeah.
Right now, but the data is only available to the last quarter of 2022. I'm not sure what happened in 2023, but in the last quarter, just under 10% of Canadian vehicles that were sold were electric. All right, so this includes what we call battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids. It does not include the non-plug-in hybrids. And in BC, it was 18%, which is the highest in the country. Quebec was 13%, Ontario was down at 8%, and all the other provinces were below that.
Okay. So in the next 11 years, we're looking at 100%. What
Right.
do you think that that's realistic?
I don't know. I think there are more people now buying these hybrid non-plug-ins.
Right.
All right. Toyota's big in them. They're like the Prius. They were the first ones to do that kind of thing. I would prefer to have one of those, particularly if you're thinking of driving, say, from Vancouver to Calgary. You really don't want to be stuck for an hour plugged in or something like that.
Well,
Or
yeah,
if
that's
you're in a
just it.
snowstorm, yeah.
So your study examines the impact of increasing EV adoption on Canada's electricity grids. So this is estimating the additional generating capacity needed to meet the rising demands from EVs. So how much more will we need?
Well, that's, I could give you a number. It's about 9,100 gigawatt hours, but that's not very useful to any of your listeners.
Right.
Or
What does that
viewers.
mean?
That basically implies one very large gas plant or Site C, which is a nearly two Site C projects. And Site C was a dam that was very controversial in British Columbia on the Peace River. And it had a rated capacity of 1.1 gigawatts. And one gigawatt is 1,000 megawatts, and that would be an enormously big gas plant, for example, or a very, very big coal-fired power plant.
Right.
Now, we need two of those if we went all electric in British Columbia as of 2035.
Okay,
All
so
right.
just British Columbia alone. So practically speaking, what would this look like across Canada? How many more electrical power plants
Well,
would we
it
need?
depends on the assumptions you make. In British Columbia, if we assume 100% electric, then we would need 3 to 4 of these. All right. Across Canada, if we assume we go all electric, which would be about 2050, we'd be looking at between 17 and 24 of these Site C plants, or a slightly smaller number in terms of gas plants.
Wow.
Now, I've ruled out gas plants for the most part, because if you're 100% electric and you're at net zero, you're not allowed to burn any gas. So you can't have gas plants. And I've also, as a result, ruled out wind turbines, because wind turbines require gas plants as backup. It turns out I've been looking at the Alberta electricity grid, for example, and if you try to go to, you'd go about half of the grid could be run on renewables, but you'd always have to have gas in the background. And for every, say, gigawatt of renewables you put in, you need about 0.9 gigawatts of gas plant backup. All right.
Right.
Which is why renewables costs go up.
Yeah. So if we needed to build that many more of these power plants, how long would it take to design and plan for these? And could this happen in 11 years, do you think?
Well, a gas plant you can put in pretty quick.
Okay.
But Site C took about 50 years from the time they envisioned it till the time it actually got built. But in reality, it was probably closer to 20 years, where over half of that time was spent going through environmental reviews and regulations and that kind of thing. And it took about 8 years to build.
Wow.
So that's what you're looking at. You're looking at about, say, 18 years.
Okay. And then as far as cost, then what would the cost be to build all of these electricity producing plants?
Good question. I don't know that, because these costs go up. Although a friend of mine recently told me that electricity being produced by Site C would cost 12 cents per kilowatt hour, whereas BC is buying electricity at 4 cents a kilowatt hour from the US. So that's your regular dams, regular hydroelectric produced power.
Right. And then you were mentioning the wind turbines actually need gas. And then here in Alberta too, we don't have a lot of water supply to also produce cheap electricity. So there's another factor.
Right.
there.
Alberta we could talk about Alberta in terms of requiring Site C, but you basically have to build gas plants. And you know yourself from when it hit 30 below, all those wind turbines had to stop. So you need gas to back that up. So you're always looking. I don't see how you're going to go to 100% renewables in Alberta.
Interesting. Okay, so you mentioned a cold snap and the wind turbines, but also here in Alberta, we recently had a cold snap that almost caused a rolling electrical blackout to take place. So with all
Well,
of
that was a result.
Yeah.
That was a result of that 30-degree blow weather, where the wind turbines had to shut down because they were in danger of snapping, of breaking. The material just can't handle that kind of cold weather, so they had to stop the turbines, and as a result, you almost had a blackout. But you have one big advantage in Alberta: you heat by gas. So if the electricity went out, I'm not sure, your fans would have to go out too. You'd get pretty cold.
Interesting. So with all of this additional load from electric vehicles being put onto the electricity grid, could this potentially end up causing blackouts?
That's a difficult thing to say. It depends on how the grid is organized and what's available from outside the jurisdiction. Unless we do something about it, I would have to say, yeah, you could experience more blackouts. Or more. You'd get blackouts eventually unless you do something about it.
Yeah, lots of variables for sure.
So to simply say we're going to put electric vehicles out there and that'll solve the problem, that's not going to solve the problem, because you got to deal with the grid as well.
Of course, we also need to look at the impact this will have on the auto industry and the overall economy of the nation. With electric vehicles, they're considerably more expensive. So will consumers purchase more used vehicles, or perhaps shop cross-border for cars? What do you think?
That's another one that's difficult to talk about, because right now when you buy a Model 3 or a Model Y Tesla, you're getting it from China. And China has recently started delivering BYD vehicles from China into the European market. Now, I'm not sure where we're getting some of our other vehicles, but I suspect they're coming from the US, some of the electrics. And if you look at Canadian manufacturing production of ICEs, so internal combustion engine vehicles, it's gone way down. It's about half. No, it's probably more like down by a third of what it used to be pre-COVID. So our industry has gone down, and we're not really producing electric vehicles in Canada itself. There are a few small outfits that are producing them, but right now we're not a big major player in terms of producing them.
Okay. And then, of course, what about the charging stations? So we've got logistics.
I'm not even going to go there, because that's got to be government supplied, or it's got to be, again, you're dealing with the grid.
Okay.
You've got to be able to have transmission lines going to these places where you're going to install them, and where do you install them? I mean, if you're driving on the highway and you come to a place, particularly in summer, I've been through Revelstoke, and it's just a pileup of cars there. You can barely get into the Tim Hortons, let alone, trying to park a car and then plug it into some electric outlet.
Right. So we're looking at logistics issues,
Right.
and having enough, an adequate supply in place across the country, all by 2035.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then I guess another potential issue would be the supply of lithium needed for all of these batteries. Do we have enough lithium supply, and what kind of impact would that have on the environment too, digging for lithium?
I think you could find the lithium. The only problem is, where would it come from?
Right.
Would it come from mines in Africa or elsewhere, or could we produce it at home? It turns out that it could be very difficult to get a mine built in the United States or in Canada due to environmental regulations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what would that do on the environment? That was part of my question there. So, and I guess like one of the big questions is this, the big picture question is there actually a significant environmental benefit from this massive effort to change over to EVs to say that it is justified?
Well, there have been some studies done, and it depends what kind of electricity grid you have. And it depends on what you do with the waste material from the batteries, from the solar panels, from the wind turbines. Estimates of how long it would take to cover any increase in greenhouse gas emissions range from you have to drive 80,000 to 120,000 kilometers before you recover the original construction or building cost of these vehicles. So it's extremely hard to tell how long and how much of a benefit it's going to be. In my view, there are other ways that we could tackle this problem of reducing greenhouse gas emissions than to try to go all electric.
Okay, so where do you see this transition to electric going over the next decade then?
Oh boy, it depends on how much government's going to interfere in the market. All right, the greater the interference in the market, in other words, mandating that we drive these things, then you're just going to get more and more people into them. But right now there seems to be a bit of a backlash against them for the problems that we've talked about. All right, places to get electricity from, upgrading the grid, the expense of these cars, the damage that occurs to them in an accident. You need to replace the battery quite often. The mining issues, that's the problem. You basically have government determining what we need to build, how we need to address the problem of climate change, and it reduces the incentive that people have to actually look into things like improving internal combustion engines or working on hybrids that don't require you to plug into the grid.
Yeah, exactly. Would those be some of your suggestions to the environmental problem?
Right. Well, I don't have any suggestions. I'm not an engineer. But, you know, my view is get the government out of this and let the engineers and innovators at it.
Yeah.
And see if they could come up with all kinds of solutions.
Right. And Dr. Van Kooten, I've also read up that this could be potentially more damaging on roads and bridges, because I guess these are much heavier vehicles.
Yeah,
Tires,
I've heard that too. That's a more difficult one to address. The funniest I heard was there was a Dutch, I was listening to Dutch radio because I can understand the language. And they were talking about the potential that if everybody had an electric vehicle, that the weight of the batteries could cause one of these parkades to collapse. And one of the physicists came on and said, no, that isn't about to happen. He says the bigger threat is if one caught fire, and a bunch of them caught fire, that they burned down the whole concrete structure.
Wow.
And he said that's the bigger threat. He said, although it's a very small chance, but that's a bigger threat than the weight of these vehicles doing the damage.
It looks like a lot more research has to be done, I think, from
I
the sounds
agree
of
with
it.
you there. Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Van Kooten. Appreciate having you on.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Dr. Cornelis Van Kooten is a senior fellow at the Fraser Institute and professor of economics at the University of Victoria.
I think it's safe to say that parenting has always been a challenge. We learn from our successes and our failures. Books, training courses, and those with parenting experience also really helps along the way. Today we're joined by Abe Block, who's a parent, grandparent, and now even a great-grandparent, and a retired pastor here in Lethbridge. He has some parenting tips for us. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Abe.
Thank you. It's good to be here, and it's good to be with all the listeners that are tuning in.
Absolutely, and the viewers too. Now, one thing that probably hasn't changed over the years, Abe, is that siblings tend to have conflicts as they grow up together. You know, brothers and sisters, various disagreements and arguments. Do you have any advice on how to reduce the frequency of this to get your kids to maybe learn to disagree with each other and still love each other?
That's a major issue. Back in my day, and of course that was a while ago, you'll understand, things were a little different. You did mention that today things have changed. They've changed dramatically, but I think one of the biggest issues, Hal, is the lack of communication. I look at the world today and I understand the young people watching the world today, and what do they see? They see a lot of disagreement. They see a lot of arguing. They see a lack of communication in our society, in our governments relating to people and to us. Wars and rumors of wars. And you look at Haiti in the world today, if you're following that at all, I mean, it's absolute chaos. And you say to yourself, this is what our children are seeing. Is it any surprise that they think the natural thing is to disagree and to argue? The other issue could be that if you don't agree with me, you can't be my friend. And so I think that's one of the key issues. And so we as parents, we need to set up a time. The Bible says, train up a child in the way that it should go. And when it is old, it will remember and learn and be. How do we train? The other thing that reminds me is that in our world as well, we have husband and wife working so much out of the home. So where do we find time to train and to teach? With my children, I set up what I call the Yes But Conference every so often, where we would sit down. Every child could speak what their issues were, what they liked, what they didn't like, and no one could respond negatively. Each one got a chance, and that meant that we as parents were listening. We heard them. And then we also had opportunity to train and respond. I think that's one of the biggest things. If we can't train, how are they going to learn? And we live in chaos.
Yeah, communication is key, absolutely, for siblings and then parents to their kids. Now, how about forgiveness and apologies, Abe? How important are they as we develop a stronger relationship with our kids and grandkids?
I think that's a great thing. Apologies and forgiveness work together. And it depends on what is an apology. You see, so often in our world, we simply hear, well, I'm sorry. And what kind of a response? Oh, don't even think about it. Well, that's not dealing with anything. If I'm going to apologize, I need to apologize to the issue. What was the issue? That's what I'm apologizing for, and it needs to be from the heart. And then the response needs to be a response to the issue. Never say, oh, it was nothing. What needs to be said is, yes, you hurt me, and I thank you for the apology, and I really want to forgive you. But that doesn't mean that there's going to be reconciliation. When the apology is correct and the response is to the issue, you're opening the door for reconciliation. And I think that's one of the keys in all of this. I think back to what our government is trying to do with truth and reconciliation with our Aboriginal people. Okay, where's the truth and what's the reconciliation? Have we ever spelled it out? And so if you don't spell these things out to each other, it's just, I'm sorry, don't worry about it. That doesn't go anywhere in my books.
Abe, let's talk about discipline for just a moment here. I know when my son was younger, he hated the fact we put him in the corner, standing all alone in the corner, you know, to show some discipline, but he'd appreciate it afterwards, and he would apologize, and we would clear the air about certain things, maybe if there's a misunderstanding as well. How important is discipline and maybe setting up that structure for our kids today?
I think discipline is increasingly important. In our world, if there's not going to be that kind of a setup, the world isn't going to cater to you. For example, I see a lot of parents in the modern world saying to their 2-year-old child, what do you want for breakfast? Day after day, what do you want for lunch, et cetera, et cetera. You know, that child is way too young to make those decisions.
Chocolate. I want chocolate. Give me chocolate.
I want chocolate.
And ice cream, right?
That's not going to be the world they get into at all. And so I think discipline needs to be in moderation, but it needs to be in relation to what the problem was. Not just some wild thing out there, but try and build it so that they learn there are consequences. Look at the world today. A lot of people haven't learned consequences, and we're living with a lot of difficulty and chaos in our world because there are consequences. As you grow up and get into your job, there are going to be discipline issues. You need to learn them when you're young and when it's not so hard.
Let's circle back to structure for just a moment here, Abe. How important is it to really set up the boundaries for our kids?
Well, I think that's the key issue. If the kids raised without any boundaries when they're young, they're not going to expect any boundaries when they go and work in an organization, and there are going to be boundaries, and they've never learned that. So how are they going to deal with boundaries when they've got a job if they've never learned it when they're young? We need to teach when they're younger so that they learn it and walk into life and walk into occupations and walk into situations with people where they need to learn to listen. And I think a lot of our young people do want boundaries. I remember the one that dad talking to me, and his daughter was invited by the school to an issue where she knew she probably shouldn't go. And so she said to her dad, "Dad, will you please tell me I can't go? That way I save face when I face my kids, and you can take the blame, but you're not in the picture." I think that works.
Now, what's the balance between setting healthy boundaries, Abe, and on the flip side, giving your kids and maybe your teenagers some freedom?
I think the freedom comes when they learn where the freedom is within boundaries. For example, for the younger children, give them space, but set the boundaries. For example, I know some girls, when they start school, they already want to dress the way they want to dress. And so I would suggest to the mother, pick out what you think are reasonable ones, but give them an option about 3 or 4. But don't give them an option of the whole expanse of what they have, because that's not suitable. So let them make choices within boundaries so that they learn, okay, I can make a choice, but there are boundaries, because in life, that's how it's going to be. I'm going to have boundaries, but I'm also going to be able to learn how to make choices. Like with finances, give them small finances at the beginning so they can learn to be responsible and accountable, but within the boundaries of whatever their finances are.
Now let's talk about, we mentioned the boundaries, but how about when your kids disagree with you when it comes to set boundaries? You know, I used to ask my father, well, why can't I do this? He said, because I said so. That was always his reasoning behind it, right? Well, no, kids need more than that. So how do we nurture that relationship and create a positive, healthy relationship when we're setting those boundaries?
Well, I can think of an example in my own life. My one daughter didn't have her driver's license yet, and she worked at a record shop, and the guy had a beautiful souped up, well, not a souped up car, but a very nice car, but he wanted to sell it. And she looked at that car and she wanted to buy it all the best way. So what can I do but say no? No, I didn't say no. I sat down with her. I said, okay, how can we work this out? Because you can't even drive it. If you're going to buy it, it's going to sit on the yard and just whatever. So I happened to have a friend who taught mechanics in the school, and he needed vehicles to teach mechanics to the kids. So I said to my daughter, go ahead and buy the thing. Let's talk to this guy, see if he'll take the car, use it for a whole year in the school. You'll get a car that's fixed up by the time you can drive it. That way you can get it, but there are boundaries set up and you're going to have to wait for it. I think if we can set up things like that with our kids to make them feel positive and yet within some kind of control factors, I think that might work.
You know, it's funny, when I was 16, I bought my first car, an old Datsun. I had just enough money, $1,000 to buy it, but it was a manual transmission, so I had to learn how to shift the manual transmission. And then I had to save up more money to insure it and register to put it on the road. So that took another 3-4 months. So
exactly, but that's a good plan. That works.
Yeah, it was a lesson, a life lesson, absolutely. So Abe, how important is it for parents to maybe play some games or activities with their kids to help maybe draw them a little closer for bonding, like bonding time with our children?
We talked about communications before. What better way to communicate with your kids than either play games with them or to do sports with them? It opens the door to conversation, and communication is the best thing. And especially if you're catering to some of their desires, even if you're not an athlete or anything, but you can support, you can be there, et cetera, et cetera. I think I've done a lot of counseling, and I asked this one couple once, what do you remember most about your parents? And the one person said, my dad was at every game I ever played. But the other person said, my dad loved me more than I could ever imagine. You know, those are two opposites, but they're both beautiful, and they bring in communication. I think we have forgotten the idea of communicating and then still disagreeing, but communicating and loving each other anyway. We don't have to think the same, but we need to be on the same page in the final end.
You know what I've noticed as a parent myself as well of 2 kids, my son and my daughter, is praising them, especially with their successes and helping them through their failures as well. What did we learn? Like a life lesson that's learned here. Abe, another big part of parenting is the process of passing our faith onto our children. How can we do this most effectively?
Well, we need to find time, first of all. I mean, like I said before, with all parents doing so much working outside of the home, and I'm not decrying that, it's a necessity in our world, I think. But it seems like that takes away time. And putting your faith in an encouraging way with your children is going to take time. And part of that time, I, for example, like to have devotions once a day. My dad had devotions every supper time. We always took 15, 20 minutes for him to teach us his faith. And then he had a question and answer period after we had eaten if we had any questions about it. The other thing is, can we take them either to home groups or to Bible study groups or to church or to places like that? And that refers me back to how communicative is my church to everybody and including youth? Do I have people in the church that can communicate and relate to the young people and build their faith? But it's got to start at home. We cannot depend on the church to do it all. We are responsible to begin that process when they're young. And then we encourage them as they mature to find it in other places as well.
And very important to live our faith as well. Abe, I think most of us as children when we were younger had some insecurity issues. What child didn't? Any thoughts on the importance of hugging and loving our children, like the physical touch and communicating that love to our children?
Well, you're talking to the wrong guy. I'm a hugger and I love to hug, but I have to be very careful. In our modern world, that's not accepted by everybody. It's not even accepted by society in many ways. We have become very individualistic. And so I have had to become very sensitive to how people feel about being hugged and about touching. I remember, especially during COVID, now this was during COVID, but out in New Brunswick, there was a kindergarten boy who hugged one of the kindergarten girls and they took him to court. Now that's really extreme, but they did take him to court because he wasn't supposed to hug anybody. But you know, we are missing the personal touch. That is so encouraging. And if we can just live with it without reacting, I think it's a very positive thing. I think touch is crucial. The Bible tells us, what did Jesus do? He took the little children and he put them on his lap. And I'm thinking he hugged them. Suffer the little children to come unto me and forbid them not. We have gotten to the stage of a little bit too much forbidding. I think the encouragement needs to be there.
You know, you're right. The human interaction is vital to healthy relationships, whatever
Yes.
they are. Now, it seems we're getting busier and busier these days, Abe, with scattered schedules for parents, many different family members always on the road. How important is it to actually sit down during family time and have meals together?
I think that's a key. In my family, when I grew up, we always had at least one meal together. The supper meal, we were together. Nowadays, with the kids scattering all over the place, the parents taking them here and there, find one meal where you can be together. Even at the beginning of the day, that's not possible anymore. Some dads are leaving at 6 o'clock in the morning and the kids aren't even out of bed yet, getting ready for school. There needs to be a place. It doesn't have to be around a meal. I like the meal idea because that's open discussion. That's where everybody's just relaxed and they're eating and they're joking and it's a good place for interaction and for discussion and for questions. But nowadays it's hard to sit down to a meal together with even the kids going all over the place. But my idea is somewhere find a time in the day, and if it's not every day, find a time somewhere during the week, a couple of times, to sit together as a family. That's relationships. That's necessary in many areas of our lives.
Let's sit down and break bread together. Abe Block is a retired Lethbridge pastor. He's also a grandfather, great-grandfather, and of course a father. Thanks so much for some of the great parenting advice today, Abe.
My joy. God bless.
You as well. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.